During the scriptwriting process for this video, I was going to say that I wasn't a fan of horror games, but I think a fair assessment would be that I don't find traditional horror games very scary to begin with. I love Silent Hill 2 because of its puzzles, atmosphere, soundtrack, and story, but I'd be lying if I said I loved it for how much it terrified me because it really didn't. I just don't believe that the medium of horror translates well to video games without an incredible team or great understanding of how the genre works backing it, or at the very least in the traditional sense it doesn't. Shocking statements to make, believe me I know, but I just have a hard time getting scared while playing a horror game whenever I do play one. When I was younger, maybe I could have enjoyed them more. I definitely seemed to enjoy Outlast when I was a child and still thought that anime was peak literature and that Sword Art Online was the best thing that the Japanese had created. 13-year-old Sanchez had a lot of problems, I'm very aware of this. Since then, you could say I've had a content awakening of sorts. I grew up and realized that 99% of the media I consumed is complete shit, and that pill was a hard one to swallow because it meant I couldn't enjoy a lot of the things I legitimately did enjoy the same way, or at least a lot of the things I thought I legitimately enjoyed. A lot of anime was like this, some games too, but mostly anime. One of these games was Outlast, a survival horror indie game with puzzle mechanics that is the furthest thing from either of those types of genres, except for indie, because this is very much an indie project. Nothing against Red Barrel in the slightest, they do seem passionate about what they're doing, but they truly are the blind leading the blind in a minefield, because holy shit, this game has problems. Massive problems that force me out of any possible immersion I could have been in, and forcing me back into the real world where my life doesn't work, and neither does this fucking game I spent my hard-earned money on as a 13-year-old. But don't worry, this isn't going to be a video about me bitching about a game in a video whom the devs of which will probably never see. No, this is going to be a video about me bitching about a game in a video whom the devs of which will probably never see, and me dick riding a game in a video whom the devs of which will also probably never see as well. So please allow me to promptly begin a video where I'll be bitching about a game and dick riding a game the developers of either of which will probably never see. The mystery game I'm going to be dick riding is none other than, drumroll please, Darkwood by Acid Wizard Studios. You definitely thought I was going to say Amnesia, didn't you? Well, joke's on you, cuck. I've never even played Amnesia, and I honestly don't know if I will after playing Darkwood for so long because it was an absolute treat to play. This game does so much right that it's kinda hard for me to play anything else, really. It's like playing Fallout New Vegas for the first time, thinking it was a pretty phenomenal game, and then immediately playing literally any other game that has been developed with an actual combat system. It's not that every other game is better than Fallout New Vegas, it's just that every other game has a developed combat system, whereas New Vegas doesn't. It's jarring to go back, because you play better literally everywhere else. So what does Outlast do that makes me want to take a long walk off a short pier? This is your final warning to stop watching if you haven't played either of these games. Darkwood is an absolute treat, and I'm acutely aware that explaining why it's good ruins a lot of what makes it amazing in the first place, so I urge you, go and play it if you haven't already. It goes on sale pretty frequently, and speaking of, actually, it's on sale at the time of recording, so go buy it and go play it right now. Even though I'm a real gamer, TM, this game was freakishly easy. When I was a little piss baby and got scared easily, I played up until about the arena where you have to go turn on the electricity after it gets turned off by Cardinal Pell here. Roughly about 20 minutes into the game, I uninstalled and didn't play until a couple weeks ago. Probably because I wanted to go play Dark Souls after a mate sold me on the idea of dying a lot being a fun idea. So with that knowledge under my belt, I got to playing through the game. I saw some pretty wild things, for example some naked fellas taking turns fantasizing about the player, take that as you will. A shower room that would terrify a 10-year-old. A nice looking doctor that chops my fingers off, killing said doctor by ignoring OH&S policies, meeting Casper the friendly ghost. Oh fuck, I don't think he's too friendly anymore. Yo, I had no idea Cardinal Pell was a clan member. Who would have guessed that this asylum with some pretty wild fellas in them that look like they've been experimented on has a secret agenda where they experiment on asylum inhabitants? Holy shit, is that the funny wheelchair man from Big Bang Theory? Oh, bazinga! Holy shit, Casper turned the fucking pigman into a puddle. And then the credits started to roll. All of this happened in roughly 2 hours, and at no point did I catch myself thinking, "Huh, I sure am spooked, Scoob." And there's a couple reasons for that. Firstly, the story isn't much of a story at all. It's more of a series of events that doesn't stop until the credits roll. There's no build-up or reason to care beyond wish fulfillment for the 40 journalists that played this all the while hoping that they get their big break so they can move on from instant coffee to Starbucks, and for the esteem that comes with being able to tell people they've got PTSD. In the 2 hours I spent with this game, I died once total. The AI is so laughably bad in this game that they don't impose any sort of threat beyond looking visually threatening. Which is funny, because while they look threatening, they don't exactly scream scary or terrifying. Hell, they don't even make me scream to begin with. Those fellas from the start of the shower sequence hunt you throughout the entire game, and there's more of them. They're all naked and have rusty machetes. If you're up to date with your tetanus shots, you won't have much to be afraid about, and the reason for this is because the enemies have AI so bad a preschooler could probably rewrite the pathfinding scripts and do a better job. Enemies kind of just chase you around. They don't flank you or try to catch you in smart ways. They follow most of your steps to a T. They take forever to open the doors you can close behind you, and they lose interest quicker than Dream does when his fans turn 18. Considering so much of this game is running and hiding, you would think that the system would be developed more. Hiding, in my opinion, is infinitely scarier than running because it takes all control away from the player. But when you know for a fact that they're going to check every single closet and store that you get the option to hide in except your own, I can guarantee you the intrusive thoughts aren't going to remain thoughts for much longer. It's not just the fact that the AI sucks worse than first time head, but more so the fact that there's only like 4 enemies throughout the entire game that all function the exact same, and which I don't think I have to say this, but I will, isn't very scary. Especially when it compounds on the knowledge that every single death in a horror game reinforces the idea that nothing can actually hurt you. You know everything that's going to happen before it happens. The horror comes from the fact that everything will jump scare you, and that any subtlety the game could build up ceases to exist the second a cheap jump scare happens when you go past Asylum Dweller number 645, 3 minutes after going past Asylum Dweller, parentheses missing eyes and nostrils number 802. For a game with a long series of events and no real story, this game sure has no fucking urgency about it at all. Beyond the gameplay of wanting to get away from the danger, both in-game and real life, the in-game danger being getting caught and the real-life danger being that my hobby and escape is slowly turning into something worse than the current state of my very real life, there's no real reason to keep progressing the story. I understand that it's meant to be a gameplay-driven game, but if neither the monkey in charge of my motor functions or the sloth in charge of my thoughts are contained, I'm going to stop playing. We might all be apes behind the steering wheel of life, but this ape is going to take control of the fucking wheel from the sloth and hurtle it right off a cliff if it's not entertained. So if I was ready to hurtle off a cliff because of how unforgivably shit Outlast was, what makes Darkwood infinitely better? Well, beyond having a team that was acutely aware of the type of horror that they were going for, being noticeably Eastern European, which is absolutely scarier, the game deliberately trying to fuck with you in the most game way possible, atmosphere being key, giving the player deliberately shit controls to enforce the idea that you're not special and that these woods will tear you apart, and art direction / visual flair being paramount to the success that the game has carved out for itself. These games are basically carbon copies of each other, really. I did just list a lot, so let me condense my ramblings just a tiny bit. Darkwood doesn't stick to the traditional cliches of the horror genre. It knows that jump scares are cheap but effective, and it doesn't have any at all. The closest thing that the game has to a jump scare comes from the limited vision that the player has, and enemies creeping up on you, which isn't a deliberate jump scare so it doesn't lose points. The horror created primarily comes from the atmosphere the game carves out for itself through distinct use of music, art direction, a top-down perspective, and awkward combat mechanics. The atmosphere the game has is carved from the unease and ambience the soundtrack has. The eerie woods becoming haunting, not knowing what could be out there creates unease, and it gets worse when night falls. When the dark comes, the small world you occupy becomes all the more tiny, and you, the player, are forced to deal with isolation in the realest sense a game can provide you with. Not only does it do this with very deliberate lighting and sound design, but the game itself begins to fuck with you, spawning enemies that aren't there, opening doors that shouldn't be opened, creaking footsteps of phantoms, enemies breaking barriers designed to keep monsters out, and, well, the obvious. When the monsters do break in, and believe me, they will, the game tests you, and not because of some intricate combat system or groundbreaking techniques. The designers specifically chose to make combat feel hard in this game, not through hard to understand controls or mechanics, but just by limiting your options. As a player, the options available to you are a charged swing, a fast swing that uses more stamina, and a backstep, all of which works for single encounters but becomes intolerable when there are groups of enemies, which, despite my saying is intolerable, is still fun and rewarding. Despite the game forcing you into positions where you will have to fight multiple enemies at once, it never becomes a slog. These limited options make every situation tense, adding to the horror the game is thriving in. It's show don't telling you the entire time that you will fuck up, you will need to adapt, and that the woods won't discriminate because you're still new and figuring things out. Speaking of show don't tell, this game has a story as opposed to a series of events. The key difference I want to note is that there are no names in this story. Everyone has names based off of observation, and no one tells you their name as a way to set unease and make you think where you should place your trust, out of fear that anyone could take advantage of you, making you feel like a stranger near on constantly when you're in the shit just like everyone else. The only time this feeling isn't present is when you meet a child who gives you their name, and you can choose to manipulate. The game isn't showing you its hand, but it's making you very aware that this isn't a place to be making friends. The biggest gripe I had with Outlast is that the game had zero urgency in its series of events beyond making the player acutely aware that they have limited time on this planet and that they're wasting it in the worst way possible. In Darkwood though, urgency is literally the name of the game. You only have a set amount of time per day to do everything that you need to do, be it progressing the story, searching for resources, or standing still because you forgot to pause the game as you left to take a shit. Point is, the game forces you to interact with it and makes you explore it, tying skill progression to the resources you collect in important locations, meaning you need to interact with the story if you want to progress your skills. Not only that, but you need to find better hideouts to get the most out of your oven. The better your oven, the more you get out of every mushroom and piece of meat you put towards your skills. Every skill allocation has a trade-off. Each tier has about 4 perks you can get, with one more trade-off than the previous tier of perks. The more skills you get, the more you're going to be kneecapping yourself because the game forces you back into a little comfortable box in your little corner of the world. The trade-offs are meant to be negative, and they're supposed to rack up tension, and they do that perfectly. You will have to find out all of this by yourself as well. The game won't tell you anything directly. It show don't tells every single thing in this game. Ironically, it tells you something similar to that effect right before the game starts. As you load up the game for the first time, the game tells you that you are playing a challenging and unforgiving game. You will not be led by the hand, respect the woods, be patient, focus, and it sends you on your merry way. Without telling you, the game shows you that a better hideout means more resources, more areas with better loot, and more mushrooms to level up, and a better oven to min-max your skill gains, which the masochistic Guts cosplayer in me adores because it forces you to keep moving forward. I know it might sound like the exact same sort of urgency as Outlast, but it's urgency in the perfect way. Time is of the essence, and how you spend it matters an unbelievable amount. The urgency the game provides is the right nudge in the direction it wants you to go. It tells you outright that the woods are dense and that you're going to need to explore them. This forces you to move and to look for things. The more you look, the more you find. The more you find, the easier it becomes to defend yourself and get through the first night. Once that night passes, you find a reason to keep progressing from a story perspective. It's woven in through the story and gameplay, which is a key factor I want to mention and for developers to take note of. Urgency is not a spooky fella wanting to geld you. Urgency is the feeling you get wanting to see all a game has to offer, not a single buzzword to force tension. Originally, I was going to end this video explaining that I believe wholeheartedly that this genre can't be traditional and scary. It needs something more to get it over the line. And then I remembered a cute little indie horror game by the name of Stay Out of the House by VHS aesthetic lover and slasher movie adapting developer Puppet Combo. This guy is an absolute machine when it comes to making horror games. Some are better than others, but when it comes to flair, his games knock it out of the park. I really want to go into this game more on a proper level and explain why it's so good, but I want to keep this video under feature length, so maybe another time. For now, all I'll say is that this game does so much that Darkwood did exceptionally, but in a 3D environment. The house is huge, the obstacles you need to deal with are actually scary and physically imposing, especially Grandma. Atmosphere is at an all-time high, and having multiple endings is a nice touch. My knight in shining armor, urgency, is handled excellently through the entire game. I love it a great deal, and I want more people to play it. If you're looking for more, please play this. It's genuinely phenomenal. Okay, so that's the end of the video. Thank you very much for watching. Do just want to give a quick thank you to all the people that watched my previous videos. 160 views is a lot for me. Yeah, I'm really grateful for that. Yeah, video kind of blew up out of nowhere, and I had no idea how to deal with it. I was hoping to get this video done a lot sooner, but some things got in the way. But there's more videos coming, promise. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe, hit the bell, like, dislike, do whatever you gotta do. Let me know if there's anything I can improve on as well. Thank you very much. Have a good one, guys.